Hello and welcome to the Creative Impostor Live. This is our special series on creativity and media as resistance. I am your multimodal content director, podcast storyteller, and impact producer, Andrea Klunder. And today, you're just here with me. It's me solo today, no guest, no interview. And I want to have a check in with you. I want to have a little one on one. So, over the past few months, over the summer, we've been doing this series on creativity and media as resistance here on the podcast. We've been doing them as live stream videos. There have been 9 interview conversations on live stream, as well as 1 solo episode from me and 2 sort of toolkit roundups. I'm calling them 3 things for your creative toolkit, volumes 1 and 2, that are calling out other resources, other creators, other people to listen, watch, follow, read, whatever it is. And I've been learning a lot over the past few months. So these episodes are out as live streams or recordings of live streams, I should say, available all on LinkedIn on my profile, but probably easier to find on YouTube, our YouTube channel. If you go to bit.ly/creativity as resistance, you will find the playlist of all of the past live streams there. Or if you are more of an audio person or you like a little more polish in the content that you're listening to, you can listen to the edited versions on the Creative Impostor podcast in your favorite podcast listening app. My personal favorite podcast listening app, if you don't have a favorite yet or you don't love the one you're using, is called Pocket Casts. Pocket Casts is a great app. This is not endorsed by them. It's just my own personal preference. That's a great place to listen. And I've been putting out the audio versions with a little intro from me as I've had time to process the conversations that I've been having in the podcast feed. So they're not all there yet, but they will be showing up over time there as well. And I'm kind of curious, for those of you who have been following along and participating in these conversations, listening, watching, whatever it is, what you've been noticing, what has been resonating with you, what have you been learning, what feels right, what feels like it's missing, who should I be talking to? So I should say that this is not the end of this series. I want to continue having these conversations. How long? We need to keep having these conversations as long as there is something to resist against, as long as there are these pressures in society that are bringing us down, as long as the world that we want to create, that we want to inhabit, has not been realized, then we need to keep having these conversations. That is to say, I will tell you that my overall numbers of podcast audience consumption is a little bit down during this season, um, over past content that I've released. And so I'm not sure if it's just the time and the industry and what's happening overall in the podcast landscape, or if it is that people feel like they don't want to listen to something that's talking about resistance. Like maybe that's too hard, not joyful enough. I'm not sure. So I don't know if that's marketing. I don't know if that's sentiment. I don't know if that's the times. I don't know what to make of that. But I am going to be starting a new series as well called When Your Art Becomes Your Job, which also doesn't sound fun, does it? What is up with this? Ugh. Maybe it's just my mood in 2025. I'm having a hard time finding the fun and the joy, which is not to say that these have not, which is not to say that these have not been joyful conversations. We've had a lot of laughter. We've had a lot of fun. I have totally shifted my mood this year, largely through hosting these conversations and presenting them to you. So I would love for you to comment if you are watching this live, comment after the fact if you're watching the replay. Email me, Andrea at thecreativeimpostor.com. DM me on whatever, DM me on LinkedIn, message me on Instagram, whatever it is, and let me know what you've been noticing over these episodes. What's been working for you? What would you like to see more of? Is there someone that I should have on the show that you can introduce me to? These are the questions. These are the things I am wanting to know. In the meantime, I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've been learning, some of the things that I've been noticing, and some of the realizations that I've been having through these conversations to sort of help us process a little bit of what we've been discussing. So I am going to need my notes. Hang on one second. Notes, where are you? Here you are. All right. So, over the course of these 9 conversations that I've had so far with media creators, musicians, coaches, event producers, and facilitators, there are some themes that I think have arisen. I started this series because, and if you've been watching these streams or listening to these episodes, you've already heard this from me, but I started this series because with the election in the United States at the end of last year and the new administration coming into the White House in 2025, in the beginning of the year, I found myself in the bed or on the couch as much as I possibly could be. My energy sucked. It was low. I felt like I didn't want to do anything. Like, what is the point of getting up and doing the work of creating content, producing podcasts on behalf of my incredible mission-driven clients who want to see positive changes, who want to support people in their industries and in their niches and in their communities? What is the point? What is the point of talking about opera or music or mental health or business or any of these things when democracy is crumbling, the world is on fire? I don't know. Like, what is even happening right now? And I just felt heavy and ineffective. I don't know. Can you relate to that at all this year? And I didn't know how to get out of that. And one idea that was presented to me was to lean into my own creative process and find something to do for me. And I had not been producing episodes of The Creative Impostor very consistently, mostly because I was very busy with client work. Secondly, because I only like producing episodes when I feel like I have something to say or something to discuss or people to talk with about a particular thing. And thirdly, because of the aforementioned, what's the point feeling that I was experiencing. So I thought, okay, what could I podcast about? What do I possibly have to contribute to the discourse of society at this time that will be useful and helpful? And I didn't feel like I had any answers. Hello, this is part of the whole reason why podcasting exists. This is part of the whole reason I ever got into podcasting in the beginning more than 10 years ago, which is to create a space and a platform to learn from other people who are doing the things that I want to be doing, uh, who may have some answers for me that I don't currently possess. And so I wanted to go back to resistance school, I guess we could call it, and call upon people who I see doing the creative work, showing up, creating the world that I want to live in, and asking them how they were doing it. How are you doing it in this time when it feels overwhelming and heavy and pointless, and there's so many horrible things happening? So that was the beginning of this series. One of the themes that I knew was going to come up is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Take that further, accessibility and belonging as well. The current federal administration, as I think you know, has launched an attack on DEI, whatever. And I had a wonderful conversation as part of this series with Monica Rivera. So if you haven't listened to my conversation with Monica, please go back and review that one. It was so inspiring. I probably need to change the title of it because it didn't get as many clicks as some of the other episodes. And I don't think that's because of Monica. I think that's actually because I titled it uh, something like "Don't Look Away When You Feel Sadness and Rage." Again, with the heavy titles and topics. But I I really wanted to talk with Monica because she does a lot of work in the corporate space. I just realized that my camera is out of focus. Why does this keep happening? Oh, maybe I need a new camera. Hold on. Can I fix it? No. Go back and focus, camera. Okay, well, hopefully it'll come back in focus at some point. I wanted to talk with Monica because she does a lot of work in the corporate space. She speaks, she supports other speakers and content creators and leaders to elevate their platforms and present themselves in their best light and deliver their messages with clarity and with purpose and in a successful way. And Monica has consulted on DEI stuff in the past and currently. And so we really talked about in our conversation breaking down that phrase, that moniker, which quite frankly is probably doing a disservice to the movement and to the sentiment of it, which is diversity, equity, inclusion. Diversity. Not all thought is the same. Not all people contributing to a thing are the same. Great. Equity. We all have a fair stake in the thing that we are doing. Inclusion. Everyone gets to participate. Everyone is welcomed and we all work together. I mean, what part of that is threatening? What part of that is not good? Belonging? We want people to not feel like they belong? What? We want things to not be accessible to people? What? I mean, just looking at that phrase and breaking it down, and also looking at what are the ways in which we can foster those values in the workplace and um, in the spaces that we inhabit that may not look like a quota or in hiring, or may not look like um, a specific consultant that you need to bring in to hire to do a thing to check a box. Like, what do those words actually mean? And how do we create cultures in our groups and in our communities that really live up to those values? I also talked with Elsie Escobar, who is one of my podcasting mentors, about how diversity isn't just about ethnicity or gender, but also about whose voices are being listened to. It's about taking the initiative as consumers, as audience members, as members of society to seek out voices from everyday people who are not being served to us by the algorithms at the top of our feeds. So just because somebody has the biggest platform or the loudest mic or the most controversial take or rage baity headline and topic does not mean that those voices, that those views are representative of the majority. Social media is rigged to keep you glued, to keep you angry, to keep you fearful, to give you FOMO. not to give you an accurate representation of what is going on in the world, of how people are feeling. So, the learning there is not only to think about what are the creative ways in which we can invest in the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, access and belonging, but also what can we find in the culture if we dig a little deeper beyond what is being served to us, if we actually go out and seek other voices, other perspectives, other points of view. And then the third part of the diversity conversation that I was thinking about when I was reviewing these episodes came from a recent one that I did with creators Tanya Muhammad and Shah Jahan Khan, who are in the process of developing a narrative podcast about the music scene in Karachi in Pakistan, which is where they are both, their family heritage is from. And that responsibility of DEI is about being a creator. So I was talking about being a part of an organization or a company with Monica, talking about being a consumer and seeking out diverse voices and perspectives with Elsie. And now with Tanya and Shah Jahan, I'm thinking about as a creator with skills, with tools and resources, telling the stories that represent a unique point of view, that represent a piece of culture that maybe we haven't heard as much about or from, even when the landscape for narrative podcasts and diverse storytelling may not be the most conducive. I remember when I was starting my first business, which was a yoga studio in 20, hold on, 2013? Is that right? Uh, in any case, whenever I was starting it, economically was not a good time. And people were telling me, why are you starting a business during a time of economic recession? This is the worst time to be starting a business. Listen, it was the time. It was just the time for me to do the thing. And I think that that is part of what Tanya and Shah Jahan were talking about is like, this story doesn't exist out there. So can we position ourselves in a way that we can tell it and that we can share this piece of our culture and our history? Okay. Part of DEI is inclusion. And I also had the opportunity to talk with Mary Doctor about creating inclusive and welcoming spaces. And Mary does an event called Show and Tell for Grownups here in Chicago, hopefully one day expanding to other geographic locations. And her brand is Tell Me Why It's Cool. And one of the pieces of culture that she has created around her events is that we're not talking about politics. We are not identifying ourselves by this is, what party we're part of, or this is what our beliefs are. We are coming together to talk about something that we love, that we're passionate about. We are coming together in the practice of being human and finding our commonalities in our humanity, in our shared experiences, without having to pick sides. And also talking with Lee Cambry, who is a coach specifically for leaders who are identified as women or LGBT. And Lee also challenged me a little bit to think about the concept of inclusion, of not just including the people whose values align with me and with mine, but also that really, really, really inclusion is also about creating space to hear the voices of those who may not align with us. And whew, that was challenging, but that was part of the conversation and it gave me a lot to think about. Also, we cannot talk about resistance. We cannot talk about fighting against the policies that are oppressing us without also talking about self-care and setting boundaries. And that was part of one of the very first conversations that I had with Lisa Lackey about trusting yourself, listening to your inner wisdom, knowing what it is that you need to feel supported, knowing when it is time for you to speak up and when it is time for you to step back and let some other voices come to the forefront. Also talking with Elsie about choosing the platforms, the containers, and the audiences for what you're sharing and how you want to share. Being a creator, being visible, having a platform, there are certain responsibilities that we're going to talk about in a moment, but also it doesn't require that you share the most vulnerable things with everyone in every space. So, really thinking about where are the places that will be most effective and where I am the safest to deliver the message in the way that I am delivering it. And those choices are going to be different for everyone. And so that was something that I hadn't really considered before, is being selective about matching your message to the container and to the audience that you have. Speaking of speaking out on platforms, this series was largely inspired by two local musicians here in Chicago, Wendy Parman and Sue Fink, because I saw Wendy and Sue organizing a concert, a benefit concert for a nonprofit organization that is supporting people who are bringing legal action. And they were gathering the voices of so many local artists to have this benefit concert as a form of resistance. And I just thought that was one of the most creative ideas. And yet, folk music and performance and artists as part of social movements, that is nothing new. And it just, even though it's built on a long tradition, it sparked something in my mind. And they used their influence, they used their connections within the city, and they used this common mission to bring together artists who they knew and then artists who they were just meeting for the first time to lift each other up and create this really incredible experience. Also using platforms, Jen Briney, who is a podcaster with a show called Congressional Dish. Jen Briney and I were talking about how when she first started her show, which is about government, and specifically it's about Congress, one branch of our three-branch government here in the United States. And when Jen first started her show long ago, she had the belief that somehow she was going to be able to influence how we vote. And she was going to be able to influence enough people in the way that we vote that Congress might begin to change, policies may begin to change. And over time, she became disillusioned with that and started to feel like she just didn't have enough influence to actually change Congress. Well, what she found was that what she can do is she can inform those of us who are in her audience and equip us with the knowledge to be able to make informed choices in how we respond to and prepare for policies that may be working against us. Also had the opportunity to talk with Jenny Wetter from Repros Fight Back, which is an advocacy organization and podcast about reproductive health and reproductive justice. And Jenny and I were really talking about solutions. So, part of their platform is not just pointing out the problems and the inequities, but also collaborating with members of the community, with other organizations, with other activists and initiatives to provide real solutions, education, information to people who may not find it through the traditional media channels. Which brings me to another learning. So far, diversity, equity, inclusion, creating inclusive, welcoming spaces, self-care and boundaries, using your platform to speak out. And the fifth part is participating in the system in the ways in which you can. And that is very much what Jenny is doing by showcasing states that are doing a great job. They have a report card where you can see how your state is stacking up in terms of reproductive justice, which is measured on a variety of different markers. And also, Jen Briney, Congressional Dish, reminding us to call Congress, reminding us that they do give weight to the loudest voices, the ones that call in and pester them the most. And so it can pay to be one of those voices. Monica Rivera mentioned fivecalls.org, which is a great way to get your thoughts heard in Congress. And also, there was something that I wanted to say about local options, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later. So participating in the system in the ways that you can to help influence things in the direction that you want. This one is also frustrating to me because it feels like it doesn't work. I know. I don't feel represented right now. Okay. Continuing on, the next piece is personal accountability. What are we responsible for, even when we are setting boundaries, even when we are taking media breaks, even when we are turning off the news of the world and watching something mindless on TV, or spending time with friends, or going out in nature and disconnecting from the machine? We still have personal accountability, which was part of what I was getting at with that super negative sounding title that I gave Monica's episode. Monica, I'm so sorry. Which is that even when things are painful, and even when we feel like we can't do something about it, it doesn't mean turn a blind eye. It means see it, witness it, acknowledge that it's happening, even when we don't like it. When I was talking with Mary about Tell Me Why It's Cool and Show and Tell for Grownups, one thing that she talked about is focusing on what it is she has control over. And this is something that my therapist talks with me about all the time. What do you actually have control over? And what can you do in that sphere? And Mary was talking about acknowledging that she is responsible for the events that she hosts, that she facilitates. She is responsible for creating that container and holding the culture of that space. And that bubble, that world, that space, that is what she is responsible for. Okay, next item that I have learned, finding your role. Because I think part of why I didn't want to do anything in the beginning of the year is because it felt like there was so much to do. There were so many things. Once said in frustration to my partner, why does it feel like this administration is taking away everything that I love? Everything. Everything that is good about this country. They're just like, nope, you don't need this. Nope, we're not going to pay for that. Nope, this is no longer what makes this country great. So finding your role. I want to be part of the resistance. I want to make the world better. I don't want to accept what's happening in this country right now. But I feel overwhelmed when I think about calling Congress, going to protests, posting on social media, being outspoken, donating money to the organizations that I believe in. And, trying to live my life and make a living and take care of myself and et cetera, et cetera. So it can feel overwhelming when there are so many things that need our attention and so many things going wrong and so many different things we could be doing. And when I was talking with Lee Cambry, Lee was talking about knowing what role you can best fill. Resistance can look like any of those things. And he found that his role is supporting the frontline folks. He's not the frontline folks, but he needs to restore himself and have the strength and have the optimism and have the capacity to hold space for those who are on the front lines. And that was really helpful for me to think about, and to think about what are the ways in which I am showing up to provide support resources. Also, Monica was talking about helping speakers and leaders to leverage their experience and to help their voices be heard. So that was her role. There's so many different ways that we can show up. And so thinking about, who am I within the movement? Who am I and how am I showing up? And how can I best use my available skills, talents, resources, energy, etc.? Finding your role. I have 2 more for you. So this is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 interviews, 9 learnings. Okay, number 8. Leaning into your creative practice when you feel broken. In my conversation with Tanya and Shah Jahan, he said, when I feel like I'm hitting a brick wall in one direction, I lean into one of my other creative passions, one of my other projects. And he said, I believe I don't know any other way to be. Like, this is just life. This is just what we do. We create, we make things, we do things, we lean into that. He's like, even if that's laying on the floor and staring up at the ceiling while listening to music, leaning into creative practices as a way to restore ourselves and regain our energy. Also, this video is making me crazy. Every time I look back at the screen, I realize that this is out of focus. What is happening? Camera, focus. Okay, here we are. All right. Final learning. Ready? Leaning into community, building connection and bridges with those who are aligned with the value systems that we want to inhabit. This was represented by literally everyone I have talked to on this series so far. Everyone that I know is in some way, shape, or form leaning into community, making connections. The wrong thing to do is isolation. This doesn't mean that sometimes you don't need to be alone. This does mean that you can't always be alone. You don't want to be in this alone. You need to lean on those people who are in this with you. So whether that is participating in a concert with a ton of musicians or being in the audience, whether that means working with a coach, whether that means being part of a community circle like Lisa and I talked about, whether that means being part of a podcast community who are all aligning around a vision for the future, like Jen Briney's podcast, or whether that means using your platform to collaborate and connect with other organizations that are aligned in mission and vision, like Jenny's podcast, Repros Fight Back, whether that is reaching out and collaborating with someone on a creative project like Tanya and Shah Jahan did. There are so many different ways to lean into community at this time. And I think that that is the biggest learning. I think that was the hypothesis that I came to this series with. And I think I was right. Go figure. Okay, I started this series because I felt like crap in the beginning of the year. How am I feeling now? Still like crap some days. And Some days I'm feeling more energized. I'm feeling more of a sense of purpose. I'm feeling like I can put one foot in front of the other and do the best that I can. Um, one of the things that I kind of thought of, and this is cheating because this wasn't part of this series, and this podcast hasn't yet been released, but I was editing an upcoming podcast interview for one of my clients, and the conversation was with a funeral director turned therapist. And she was talking about the similarities between being a funeral director and being a therapist. And one of those similarities is helping guide people through the process and the process of grieving. Helping people, one of the similarities between being a funeral director and a therapist is helping to guide people through the process of grieving. And she talked about how that process, the stages of grief, are not linear and they're not universal. People grieve in different ways, and they grieve for different people in different ways based upon their experiences and their relationships. She touched on anger, fear, relief, acceptance, forgiveness. And as I was editing the episode, I was thinking that part of why my energy is a little bit clearer and a little bit lighter now, most days, than it was months ago, is because I was going through a grieving process. I needed the space and the time to feel all of my feelings. I couldn't just flip a switch and say, okay, I'm going to do this podcast series. I'm going to lean into my creativity and connect with people in my community who are values aligned with me. And I'm going to feel better like that. That was not what I could do. I needed to feel anger. I needed to feel rage. I needed to feel despondent. I needed to feel fearful. I needed to experience all of those. And so you might say, well, what were you grieving? What does that have to do with what we're experiencing right now? What does that have to do with resistance? And I think that I have been grieving the loss of a future reality that I thought we were building toward. Does that feel ambiguous? Does that feel big? Does that feel corny? I think that am grieving the loss of the illusion that people are basically good. And I think I'm grieving the realization that maybe the United States is not the Rebel Alliance in the Star Wars analogy. Maybe we're the Empire. You know, they say that no one ever believes in their own story that they're the villain. People are generally the hero of their own story, but not everyone can be the hero. Something to think about. So I am overall feeling better. And yet, here we are on Thursday, September 4th, as I am recording this, and the word on the street is that the federal government is calling in the National Guard to Chicago, my great city where I am right now, where I live as of tomorrow. As of tomorrow, they are calling Chicago a hellhole where they need to come in and use brute force and national might and violence to restore what to this hellscape? Let me tell you. I'm quoting this from Block Club Chicago, who has been providing excellent coverage. They're a local nonprofit. So remember, I said the local, focus on local, the local nonprofit news organization. They say crime statistics for Chicago this year show a 30% reduction, 30% reduction in homicides, a 35% reduction in robberies, and a nearly 40% drop in shootings. Chicago is also not listed as a top 25 most dangerous U.S. city, according to a list compiled by the FBI. After meeting with community violence intervention leaders from Metropolitan Peace Initiatives Wednesday, our Governor Pritzker said local investments in these programs have contributed to reducing gun violence. Shootings have decreased by 41% in areas where community workers are deployed to de escalate conflicts, according to a 2024 program report. Quote, President Trump's deep cuts to these programs are another indication that his administration is not serious about fighting crime, end quote, Pritzker said in a release. Is there crime in Chicago? Yes. Is there crime in every U.S. city? Yes. Do I feel safe in my city for the most part? Yes. I know enough about my city after living here for 20 plus years that not every neighborhood is the same. I know that there is violence. I know that people struggle and suffer in this city every single day. I know that this city is a place where we have beautiful parks, beautiful lakes. We have a lot of opportunity. We have relatively affordable housing compared to other major metropolitan areas in the United States. We have a lot in this city to be grateful for and a lot that is incredible. And we have problems just like every city. However, I will tell you that even though I am coming from a privileged location and a privileged neighborhood and a privileged point of view, this whole thing about sending in the National Guard to reduce crime in Chicago, it's fake. It's a scam because it's not going to work. What works is investment in communities, investment in people. I work with youth in the city of Chicago who are Chicago public school students from some of these crime-ridden areas. This is the result of systemic and economic issues rooted in racism, historic redlining, mental health disparities, and more. Those are the things we need to address: nutrition, mental health, economic opportunity, anti-racism efforts, not violence and escalation. So if it was really about that, these are the things we would be investing in, not sending in the National Guard. This is just complete and utter bullshit. No one wants them here. If anyone does want them here, I don't know who those people are, and they don't know Chicago. Just like LA, just like DC, this is a flex of authoritarianism and military might that is not needed and is not useful. And just like that, in my grieving process, I'm right back to anger. Not anger, rage. Why? I swear to God, my nervous system cannot take it if I see the National Guard like outside my house tomorrow. Okay. So, in summary, this has been going on long enough. What is our responsibility? How do we sustain ourselves when it feels hopeless? How do we look at what's hard and stay the course? On this week's episode of one of my favorite podcasts, which is called Vibe Check with Sam Sanders, Zach Stafford, and Saeed Jones. The episode, by the way, is called It's Still Cerulean, Bitch. Influencers getting paid for promoting political messaging. What's an influencer versus a journalist? Is this the downfall of journalism? And also ranting about a media job listing for the cutting room floor in NYC that has sparked outrage. Why? Because it was a very low paid job listing for a massive job in a very expensive housing market. In the episode, and I highly recommend that you check it out. This is again Vibe Check with Sam Sanders, Zach Stafford, and Saeed Jones. I highly recommend that you check out this episode because they were talking about how the origins of journalism in the American sense and the origins of the news have always been about commercial interests and attention. So the whole celebrity thing, the whole influencer thing, the whole algorithm thing, it's actually nothing new. It's the same premise, different platform, different technology. But there is still a responsibility for those of us who are in a position to influence, who do have a platform. And how do we determine the ethics of that? How do we determine the responsibility? Where do we land? I feel society, maybe humanity, if that's not too grand to say, is at an inflection point. We have a choice right now as a species of do we take this time, this moment, this opportunity to elevate our collective consciousness and make a leap toward a more sustainable future for all? Option one. Or option two, do we devolve into the true hellscape of consolidated power and violence towards the majority that the federal administration pretends is already here in Chicago? I'm trying to do my part in some small way by amplifying the voices of those who are doing the work for elevation and sustainability. What I've learned is that it's not enough to just create media, to just tell the story. We also need to do the work to make sure that those stories get heard and seen against the capitalist algorithms that threaten to swallow our humanity whole. Say that 10 times fast. Okay. So, what I am doing here in this space is I'm continuing creativity as resistance on this platform and on these channels. And I encourage you again to find the full playlist on YouTube, to follow us in your favorite podcast app, and to make recommendations for whoever I need to communicate with, whoever I need to invite on the show, whoever I need to talk with. And also, something that I don't talk about as much here on the Creative Impostor is that in my work, I am working to help mission driven creators leverage podcasting and integrate their content into an effective ecosystem for impact. And so I've developed a new program called Find Your Light. This is a creative content ecosystem audit where we take a look at all of your messaging, all of your platforms, see what's working, what's not working, and we make it better. And we make sure that you are leveraging the platform and the audiences that you have to their maximum potential. So I want your voice to get heard. I want you to be seen. I want your message out there. I want you to make the impact that you possibly can. And I've even gone back to school for something called behavioral economics right now, which is learning how to influence thoughts, decisions, and actions of people for good, not for evil, so that I can double down on this mission to help creatives make change. So, how you can learn more about these, if that sounds like you and that sounds like something that you're working on, is you can find out about the creative content ecosystem audits. Could I have called that something simpler? Probably yes. At thecreativeimposter.com/find your light. That is where you can learn more about this. No commitments, just finding out how you can be a part of that. And if that's not something that you're ready for, you can also find my private podcast, the Podcast Envy exclusive. And this is for you if you are a podcast creator or if you are a content creator of any type who is mission driven, who would like to learn more about using a podcast to help be the heart of your content ecosystem. And you can find that private podcast, which is totally free, at bit.ly/pep exclusive. That's the Podcast Envy podcast exclusive. And that's where you can hear more about strategies that you can implement to help you find your light and make that impact. So that's what we have going on here. My worry, and this is the last thing I'm going to leave you with. Am I going to leave it on a downer? My question: creativity and media as resistance. Creativity as resistance. Sometimes I feel like it feels fluffy. Like, are we just singing songs and making podcasts and going to events to help ourselves feel better? Or is it actually making a significant change? I don't know. Is it enough what we're doing? What do you think? Okay. That's where I'm going to leave you. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Creativity and Media as Resistance on the Creative Impostor. Again, you can find all of our past live streams on YouTube at bit.ly/creativity as resistance and find the edited versions in the Creative Impostor feed on your favorite podcast app. Thanks again for tuning in. I feel better after getting those things off my chest. I'd love to hear what you're learning, what your takeaways have been, and let's talk soon.